So HTTP server 2, HTTP server 1 is like, we kind of introduced how to interact with HTTP utilizing the HTTP protocol, using headers, and then making items show up on the screen in HTML that's a string of of HTML. HTTP server 2 kind of brings that all together and incorporates, at the end of it, the overall architecture is going to sort of look like the architecture of Django. So right now, there's only 2 files. By the end of this, I think there's going to be 2, like 1 directory or 2 directories with like 5 or 6 files. Django, the Django comes with like 13 directories and like 50 or 60 files in it. A lot of it you don't need to know, but the overall architecture is going to kind of look like what it's supposed to look like after we finish HTTP server 2. Let's go ahead and get started. So I cloned HTTP server 2. But first, I don't want to be working on the master branch. I want to create my own branch. I want to get used to branching, because you never really want to push straight to master. So how do I create a new branch? Get branch checkout. So what is it? Get checkout.
Get checkout
dash B. The name of the branch. So solution. So now I'm no longer on the master branch. I'm on the solution branch. And let's look back at the README. So up until this point, we've been hard coding our responses, or HTML responses, by just creating a string of like HTML, blah, 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 and returning that to the browser. That's all fine and dandy when we're only creating a really small application of like 2 files and we're only sending back 2 responses. But as the application scales, that's just not a scalable solution. You're going to have a file of, thousands of lines of code. So let's open up current. Let's split this. So we don't even need this. So in the server file, we're actually like hard coding HTML. That's not a scalable solution. It's just not a scalable solution when we're actually writing a full-fledged application. We can't have everything in just one single server file. We want to do separations, like single responsibility, and separate our code out into separate files, and only have those actions or those operations occur in the file, that specific file. So requests should be in a request file, responses should be in a response file, your routes should be in a routing file, your HTML, the actual stuff you're actually returning, should be in its own folder as well. So that's what HTTP server 2 is getting at. So returning hard-coded responses for every request isn't very useful, and generating HTML in Python is pretty daunting. So how do we actually use HTML or start writing HTML files? There is this Python library called Jinja 2 that makes generating HTML much easier. Jinja allows us to write actually HTML files, and then interpolate Python code inside of it. And so in order to do this, we have this new command called Python -n -v. What is this? There really isn't any explanation in this challenge of what this is.
Virtual environment.
Virtual environment? What is a virtual environment? Justin?
It's set up like a separate instance of things that you would install like within the virtual environment wouldn't be available outside of it, and just tell the light experience.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what it is. The virtual environment is a self-contained environment with only Python installed when you create it, and then you're able to install libraries in that virtual environment, so it's not affecting the rest of any other applications on your computer. And the reason why we do this, because so if I install like Jinja on my application, there's different packages and different versions of different software installed on my locals or on my laptop that might conflict and might prevent Jinja from working, or the library that I'm trying to install working. So it's always important to create a virtual environment and have only those packages that you want, those libraries that you want, contained in that virtual environment. So it's not affecting anything. So this is what we're going to be doing going forward. And once we get into the Django, this is how you set up like a Django app. You're always going to be creating a virtual environment. So let's clear this. So Python-m dnv. So it's creating a virtual environment. Show up here. And in our current directory, we have this virtual environment directory created. That's automatically created when you Python make a virtual environment and call it a virtual environment. Here's all the stuff. You don't really need to know what this is about or what is contained in here. Just know that it creates this. Now we created a virtual environment. Now we actually have to activate the virtual environment. You source dnv, then activate. And when we activate our virtual environment, you can tell we're actually currently in our virtual environment because it says dnv next to our current directory that we're in. Now, once we're in here, we can install any packages that we want. Go ahead and pip install Jinja 2. I'm just going to copy this code here. This is all on your notes. Pip install Jinja 2. Great. It says you should be using pip version 19.03. However, version 20 is available. All right, let's upgrade this. Copy that command. You'll more than likely see this every time you create a new virtual environment. Activate it. Great. No errors or warnings. So our application is getting larger and larger. We need to organize our files within folders. In Django, all HTML files are nested in a templates directory. Let's create that. Let's create that. There we go. So make directory the templates. So this is where all our HTML templates are going to reside. On the list here, we have request, server, and templates. And templates is on the same level as our server. Clear. So we kind of want to replace all of this. So we're not having all this logic done in the server Python file. So we're not going to be hard coding any of this stuff anymore in the server file. So we need to create a time because we want to go to our time. So ls, so we want to cd into templates. ls, there's nothing in here. Touch time.html. ls, there we have our time. I'm going to open, go time, HTML. Great. So we have an empty HTML file. Fantastic. We should have an HTML file in our time route templates. Let's first, I just want to make sure this application works. I haven't done that yet. So I just need a Python, need a CD up one level, and I want a Python server.py. Python server.py. All right, nothing's happening. So I want to see where this port is, localhost 9292. I just want to curl local the HTTP / localhost. What is it? 92. How does that? Is it 92? Is that the right? Okay. Great. So we're getting a response back from our localhost when we curl. Let's make sure it's actually working in our browser. IP91. Hello world. Just backslash time work. I'm gonna actually change that up. Let's not do hello world. Body just like H1. That work? I just want it to be bigger. Kill the server. Python server again. A little more visible. I don't want to save. Clear. So I'm just want to make sure the application works. All right. Let's go back to the README. You should have an HTML file in our HTML or in our time route, templates/time HTML. So let's just copy this is the code we want, and then we'll run through this and see what it looks like. So we have HTML, that this doc type indicates that this file is an HTML file. HTML head. In our head, this is just where all the metadata goes that our browser needs to parse through. Make it, you don't need to know about this main CSS. That's just boilerplate that we have in there from the code. It's not important. And we have our body. The time is now. Then we have everything looks the same except for this time. So Jinja, as it says up here, Jinja allows us to write HTML just like this and interpolate Python code inside of it. So within the two brackets, the double brackets, we're able to pass in Python variables. So we can, when we actually create a template, we can pass Python variables, and wherever these variables occur in the HTML will show up. Continue going down. You've got an HTML file with a twist. This time, the two curly braces are interpolate a time variable that we pass in using Python. All right, so server should now read. All right, that doesn't really help. I'm just going to copy and paste this code, and then we'll walk through this. So server, we have to import Jinja. So from Jinja 2, yep. Import template. And down here, we're essentially going to be replacing this with this code. And I will walk through. That's not right. So in place of this, now we have all of this. Just want to see, let's break down what's happening here. Let's run the file or run the server. Okay, the server is running. And now let's go to /time. Uh-oh. Nothing happened. So I'm going to, instead of going to HTA, doing it through the browser, let's see if I can do it through Perl. Still not working. Still not working. See what's going on here. So we're not getting any errors, but we're not being able to get a response back. So request, parse, grabbing the URI. This is all done. That's all code you did in HTTP server 1. It's grabbing the parse request, the method, /time. And we have this with open templates. So it's going into our templates folder, grabbing time as my file. Then we're grabbing my file.read, or reading that file, or saving it to a variable called HTML from file. Now we're creating a template using the template class that we imported from Jinja 2, and we're passing in the HTML from file. Now we're creating another variable, creating that template.render. We're passing in the time dictionary called time.now. Do we have date time up here? Find connection, send body response dot encode. Where's body response? So we're not even using. Let's see what's going on. I want to print this HTML from file. So with this open, we saw this when we were working with CSVs, right? Open the CSV. You can open any files using this. This isn't native to CSV. This is just Python. And this .read is another built-in method, not related to the CSV library, just that we have access to that we can read the file. I'm going to run this server. I'm going to run a curl \time. Empty reply from server. So we didn't get it right. We got something different. But now look what we have. We actually have what looks like a string of just this time template. So it's literally what we're getting back. And let's see what else. We're passing that string into a template class, assigning to a template variable. We're creating a body response. So we're not even actually doing an HTTP. We're not putting it in the format of what we need. We're not using any headers. We're just passing in a string of HTML. So we can't essentially send it to a browser because the browser can't read it because it doesn't have the protocol, the status, and all this content type. So we're missing this method. Oh, did I just do something? So if that's what it says in here. Use time. We need to load the entire HTML into the file. We read the contents of the file from HTML file. I can do this. So that's what this variable is. That's what that. It's just a string. Get rid of that. We pass the HTML file to Jinja template class. We'll create a new Jinja template object. We're saving this as template. Right there. We render the template with a dictionary of variables that the template needs. In our case, the HTML we created needs a time variable. So we pass this time equals date time now function. Finally, we send that fully bit HTML response to it. So it says, ensure you've got a properly response coming back. Kill the server, clear that. We have the server. Now if we all right. So this is what's coming back. I don't know why it wasn't coming back before. I probably just needed to clear the cache or something. Now let's hit localhost \time. But we still don't get anything back. Why is that? Headers? Headers. We're not actually adding any headers in here. So we need to pass our text body right here into right there, right? Body response, HTTP response equals build HTTP response, body response. Now we want to pass that into HTTP response. Is that a good variable with all that? Everything. Body response. I know I'll do it. Because this is a template response. This is the body. I guess I'll keep it the same. So now let's walk through what's happening. We're creating, when we hit time, it should open up the time template as my file. We read that file, it turns it into a string. Then we pass that string into the template class that we get from, that we're importing from Jinja 2. Our template.render date time. So we're passing this dictionary of time into the date time, or it's like the current date time, is template response. And now we actually have to build the HTTP protocol right here. So we're passing the template response into the build HTTP right here, the text body. And then we return the headers, content length, and the HTML body. Right there. And then we send that HTTP response and encode it. Does anybody have any questions? Let's see if that works. Uh-oh. Working. Clear that. Let's run that server again. Great. Now if we go here, hopefully it works. Change the port to 2. Great. All fine and ensure you have a proper response coming back. So all that, so we can actually use HTML. Notice something a little. In this build HTML response, we have a head and title, and it says an example page up here. But in my time HTML, I have like another title. So we don't even need the server, this whole thing right here, right? Because we already have an HTML and head in our time HTML head. So let's just use this. This is what we want to use. We don't want to use. So we can actually just delete all this. If that's the case, we don't even need this part. Let's do HTML body. We can actually get rid of that entire variable. Just want to make sure this is still working. Clear from the server. Great. So up here it said example page before, but now we want to, since we got rid of that head, that variable here that already had a head and title, it should say what time is it. So right here, this is the title. Refresh. What time is it? Right there. Slowly hacking away. Cool. Next, try hitting time in the browser. You're finding that you can't hit it. We already did that. Turns out that Chrome needs the HTTP headers in order to display things properly. A few things you can do before moving on to the next section. Utilize build HTML response. We did. Right there. Repeat the process we use for time to account for the just normal backslash route. We use an HTML template called index for this route. Ooh. All right. Kill the server. So we want to essentially repeat everything down here, but do it for this route as well. And in doing so, we want to use an HTML template called index for that route. Here, in this template, we want to create another file called index.html. And see if bang, we're already doing that. Hello, Platoon. Then in that bottom, we want that H1. Hello. So that's our index template. Let's copy this. Put it up here. So instead of time, you want to go to index. We want to use the index template for reading it. My file. Instead of not passing any variables like we are here, we're passing in time into this time template. But in index, we're not passing any variables. We don't want to render any. So we don't need the time, client connection, send response, encode. Looks right. Let's see if that works. Clear, run the server. Yeah. What time is it? Works. I go to backslash, hello world. Now up here it says hello kilo. Let's keep going. Refactor. So we repeated the process for just the backslash index. As we build more routes, we're going to have more Jinja 2 files, and we need to utilize helper methods. Okay. Let's see what this looks like. In the server PY, we have this GetTemplate path. Build HTML. If client request parse. So let's take a look at the current state of our server and figure out what we need to do. So here, there's a lot of repeated code, right? Like this is all pretty much the same. The only thing that's different is the template we're using and any variables. So this is the use of helper methods. So here, we have this get template. Copy that. Put that up here. So get template looks like it takes into a path. Based on that path, determines what template we're going to be using, and it just returns a README, returns my file .read, which is that string of what the HTML looks like. Let's see. Okay. If parse request /time, view template get template looks like it calls that, passes in that time URI. Build HTML response, view render. Let's copy that down here. Comment that out just to make sure. Format. Oh, don't need that. Let's delete this and walk through what's going on. Kill the server, clear it. Run the server again. Just gonna refresh. Now we gotta go /time because that's what we want to see. Time is now, it's still working. So it comes here when you go to /time, grabs the URI, template, creates a new template class object, passes in get template method, which passes in the time. That's what the template we want to use, the HTML template. Grabs that path, returns the view. There's a variable named view. You're going to see that when we talk about a view controller. Then we create another variable, body response. That's where we pass in the build HTML response. We're passing in that view.render HTML or view.render and then the time variable. You can even create another variable to make this a little bit easier. This part to read, and then we send the body response and encode it. That works still? Cool. Let's go back to the README. figure out what we need to do to make this. All right, server receives a request and passes it to the request class. Parse through it. So create a server. We listen to the server. Wait for a connection. Wait for like a request to come through. Create a new client request using the request class that we created in HTTP server 1. So we parse through the request, grab only the information we want, which is like the URI. Then the request gets passed to the router. I haven't done the router yet, but the router is here. If here, that's the router currently. It decodes it and determines what kind of response we want to send back. Response will create an appropriate response with properly formatted HTML to server.py. So come here. So we create a template. Grab the template, open it, README file, or not README file. Grabs the HTML template, reads it, returns it as a string, passes that string into the template class, assigns it to a variable view. Then we pass in view.render and the variables that we want into this HTML body response right here. That's what we're passing in there. And then we just have the body response, which is literally this whole thing. That's where the client will send proper HTML response. So everything looks okay. Let's do it the same thing, but with this. Here, except we don't need that either. View template, instead of passing in time, we want to pass an index because that's the template we want to get. View render. So it passes in template, index template into the template. Okay. Let's run this again. Just make sure everything looks good up to that point. And just go to backslash, hello world, hello keyword. So we're slowly slimming down our code using single responsibility.
You said we're slowly slimming down our code. It seems the opposite, that we're adding more.
We are adding more. It looks right here, but once this is done, it's going to be like 8 lines long.
Okay.
And then we're going to separate like the response class into an entire different file, folder. And so that's where everything's like single responsibility, and the overall architecture is going to be easy to use. Because if we didn't do that, this entire server.py file would be like thousands upon thousands of lines of code as the application scales.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
So we're in a virtual environment. Can this only run in a virtual environment then?
No, but like,
Because you have to call in the Jinja.
yeah. So only certain. If you try to install certain libraries, it might conflict. The libraries you're trying to install or the package you're trying to install might conflict with packages that are already on your local machine.
Okay.
So it might not work. So that's why you always want to do a virtual environment. But in theory, it doesn't always have to be a virtual environment.
Okay.
But going forward, when you're working in Django, you're always going to be setting up a virtual environment. So everything's kind of self-contained in that environment. All right, done with release 1. Release 2. Create a new file, response.py, and a response class. And here are 4 few pointers to get you started. Response should be initialized with a URI string from the request. Oh, I don't even know what that means. Response should be initialized with a URI string. So in the init, takes in the URI string, okay, and a dictionary of possible template variables. Okay, because some templates, like time needs template variables, An index doesn't. So a dictionary of possible template variables. Be sure to account for situations where there aren't any template variables. Dunder string should be able to render a fully formatted Jinja HTML template using template variables if applicable. All right. Kind of saw this at one point, but I haven't seen it since, so I'm still a little confused about that. We will stripping GetTemplate and build HTML response out from server.py and putting it in the response. Okay, so I guess they're class methods. Don't forget to remove code from server.py as you strip things out. By the end of your refactor, your server.py should just include this tiny bit of code. Yeah, let's go with it. One final. All right, let's just walk through this. All right, we need to create a response.py file. Actually, I'm going to just copy this over, because that's what it should look like by the end. Ugh, scary. I'm just going to comment that out. So I don't want to touch that. I just want to like reference it. Miss something? Line connection closed. Oh, yep. The parse request. Create a new file, response.py, and a response class. I kill the server. Clear down here. Bring this up. Touch response.py. Code response.py. Split the screen. There's my there you go. There's my response class, or where it's going to be. It. We don't need any of that. Okay. So here's my response class. Looks like I'm going to need response in my server.py file. So up here, from response, import response. Response should be initialized with a URI string from the request. So where's the URIs? So request. So in here, it should take in a URI. And I can do self.URI with URI.
The F back and self unlike.
Thank you. And then a dictionary of possible template variables. Whether or not we're going to need them in the template. So it's called template variables. And let's initialize it. Currently it's empty because there might not be any. We do self.template variables and those template variables. So this is where we pass in like a time dictionary of time or anything. And then it says we'll do the string, dunder underscore string, def dunder string. What's this dunder underscore string do? Anybody know? Kind of saw it a little bit.
Gives you an interface to a standard string method.
It gives you an interface of a standard string method.
Just like length,
Yep.
there's a standard method for string, as if you're converting something to string.
Okay. So it gives you like a string method and you can convert it to string. Yeah. So when you're in the past, when we were creating objects or classes and we print the object out, it would say like request object and it had like some numbers. But if you wanted to print that, if you had stuff in here and you decided to print out that object, anything that was in here would actually show up as that object. It's kind of like a standard boilerplate. It's like, here, we don't want it to have this weird object. We don't want it to say like request object and have like weird numbers. We actually want like a visualization of what we are actually wanting to print. So we can actually print whatever we want. But in here, should be able to render a fully formatted. What we want to return is essentially a Jinja HTML template. So I'm just going to pass that out right now. I'm just going to pass it because I'm going to have to move some stuff in there. And then we'll be stripping out GetTemplate, build HTML response from putting it in here. So we can get rid of this and putting it into our response class. Since these are class methods, or instance methods, when they are class methods, we have to do self keyword. All right. Now let's look at what it is. Let's look what we have to pass in. So response is passing in index here, and it's also passing in time. But what we want to return from the string is return a render fully formatted Jinja template. So how do we grab the template? So GetTemplate takes in a path, which is the URI, right? So we don't even need this. We can just do self.uri. And what were the variables we set down here? Template, get. So we can do template.getTemplate, which calls this. We have to do self.getTemplate. I don't know. Makes sense. Pass in. We don't even need that. I'm just gonna say it. What's that?
No, I'm trying to think. You just need to build the response. Then all you need under the string is the response itself. So after you've built the response, that's what you put in there.
Yeah. So
you don't need that.
I'm only calling that GetTemplate creates the template. So I actually also need to import template. So we're not even needing
Jinja
2 in the server.
Basically moving everything in the server over to the.
Yep. And also do the date time.
Not for
No.
this.
So in here, I'm creating a template, GetTemplate. It's just kind of hard to do right now. So response takes an index, initialize with the URL index. No template variables for that one. Take the string. So when we call this string method,
You want to do it after you're built HTML response. So you want to build your HTML response for it first because you want to return that string with the header and everything else.
so view. I'm just look at here, view template, get template. So I'm getting the template. Build HTML response. Build response equals. Oh, so it's just going to be returning.
Yeah.
So I just have to return that.
Yep.
So return, build HTML response, view. Yeah. So I'm passing in HTML body, which is this view. But return self.
It's actually even simpler.
So I'm making it more difficult.
A little bit. Because like all my string Thunder has is literally just return self.html response. Because in the function in the method for build HTML response, I complete the entire thing out there. I build the body, I build the response into it and all that. So in the end, you just need to return
Just
that final response, basically, once you built it out in that part.
I'm just gonna keep it as this right now, see if it works. So, but right now, I have the response. I think I've done everything up to this point. One final refactor. Oh, here, I needed this too. I was wondering when I was calling that string dunder method. Encoding it. So let's see if this works, and then we'll walk through what's happening. Oh gosh, it works. Oh no. Template has no length. All right. Line 20, insert with UI. Cool. Template. String response. Self.view. That's over here. Return HTML as the length HTML body. Build HTML response. I'm passing in view. It's saying object of type template has no length.
You need to use your template building in the HTML response.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
because templates an object. So that's why I ran into that issue.
So get template. Oh yeah, okay. Body response. So then actually template render. And then the view.render. So I need to actually do the render, right?
Yeah, I did the render in the HTML response itself. Under
So
that
right
whole
here.
section. Yeah, in that whole.
So build HTML response.
Yeah. So template, get template file name, and HTML body is the template rendered with template variables essential. And then self.html response is the header with that body now built in there. And then that's like.
So let's do what you did. So I can get rid of this up here.
Yeah. All you're gonna return at all in that is the new variable that you're building under your build HTML response.
So I can do that down here.
Yeah.
And then
So let's see here, temp equals self template.
So I need
You need to put. So you need to take in 3 variables into your HTML response because you're going to have your file name and then any potential template variables that you're emitting with.
let's look at what I have up here. Just copy. I just called some things a little differently.
Yeah.
Get template, HTML from template, kind of template. Here's the template. Template body response. Render self template. Template variable.
Also, when I init, it's calling. I have mine building the HTML response as part of the init. So that's why
Oh, okay.
it's building it all in there.
I just want to see if this works.
That's different.
World. Okay. So yeah, I was just missing the render and forgetting to pass in any template variables into the render. Let's read what's going on. Kind of a lot. We got packed. So if client requests we're parsing through the response, or I'm sorry, the request, grabbing the URI, bringing in the response class, passing in index, which is the template that we want to use, and any other variables. So the variables have to be passed in as a dictionary. That's just, so if you wanted to add other variables, be like comma, name, and then like home. Just see what happens. So in here, it's a dictionary. Comes in up to here, grabs the URI, any template variables, assigns those to instance variables, creates instance variables. That's pretty much it up there. And then client connection.send string dot response from the response variable, which is this class. Comes over here. That's what this dunder is. Dunder string runs through here. Grabs a get template by using the self URI. So, URI is not even the right term. It should be template name, right? That's actually what we're passing in. Template name. Grabbing the template name, reading from that file, returning a string version of that template. Right here, HTML from file. We actually just call that the view. That's what it was before. Passing that string into the template class that's coming from Jinja. We're using that template variable, and then we're rendering any template variables, passing any template variables as a dictionary into here. And that's the entire body response. Then we're passing the body response into the build HTML response as HTML body. That's where it creates the HTTP protocol, the version, the status code, content type, length, and body HTML body. See if it still works. Nope. Oh, okay. All right. Hello world. Backslash time. Okay. I just want to see in your HTML template, I just want to show you that you can pass additional variables. I haven't done this in a while. Hello. What did I pass in there? As the other kilo. So if I wanted h2 tag, instead of, hello, if this works. Passing in there, name, exclamation point. Server, LOP. So you're able to pass multiple variables in there. All right. Let's look at our README. Almost there. One final refactor. We want to put all of our custom classes request response in a classes folder at the same directory levels as templates and server.py. It's part of our single responsibility principle, just like we have in templates. Okay. Now we're just refactoring, making sure everything looks good and it's organized. Make directory with the classes. OS. Almost there. And after this, we'll take a 10-minute break. We're going to move that classes into there. Move. But now we need to import that stuff correctly. Classes. Clear. Let's see if this is running still. All right, still works. Great. All right, let's take a 7-minute break and come back and we'll finish it up.